The letter arrived with a whisper of old secrets. Aaron Thomas hadn't expected to receive anything in the mail beyond utility bills and junk, let alone a handwritten envelope with yellowed edges and a wax seal. It felt like something from another century. Inside was a short, formal note informing him of the death of his estranged uncle, Martin Fields, a man he'd last seen at the age of 12, and that Aaron was now the sole heir to the man's estate, a remote, aging farmhouse in Kentucky. It wasn't a joke. The letter was notarized, signed, official. Aaron sat at the kitchen table, staring at the paper for almost 20 minutes, not saying a word. His wife, Linda, peered over his shoulder. "That's unexpected," she said, a hint of amusement in her voice. "We could use a getaway, something different, a little adventure." Aaron hesitated. Martin hadn't been a friendly man. In fact, he remembered the man's cold stare, the way he always locked the cellar at night, and how the townspeople avoided eye contact when Martin came to town. But curiosity, mixed with a strange sense of duty, got the better of him. They packed 2 bags and hit the road 3 days later. The closer they got, the more the world seemed to slip backward in time. Pavement gave way to gravel, gravel to dirt. The landscape became emptier with every passing mile. No gas stations, no street lights, just fields of corn that stretched like endless waves under a grey Kentucky sky. When the GPS finally gave up, they found themselves following memory and instinct more than directions. The house appeared around a bend, wooden, 2 stories, with a rotting wraparound porch and shutters that creak with each breath of wind. Stepping out of the car, Aaron felt something change in the air. The smell was earthy, yes, but behind it was a hint of iron, faint but sharp. Linda, ever the practical one, walked straight to the front door and turned the key. The lock clicked open with surprising ease. Inside, the house was frozen in time. Dust clung to furniture like it feared being disturbed. The curtains, though faded, were drawn neatly. A single photo of Martin remained on the mantel. He stood in a field, unsmiling, his eyes strangely out of focus. The quiet in the house was not peaceful. It was oppressive, as if it were listening. That first night, Aaron barely slept. The bed was too firm, the air too still. Around 2:45 a.m., he woke to a creaking noise. Slow, deliberate. He sat up in the dark, listening. Linda was asleep beside him, breathing deeply. Then came a faint sound, like nails dragging along wooden floorboards. He held his breath. It was coming from beneath them, directly under the bed. Aaron leaned over the edge, shining his phone's flashlight downward. Nothing. The noise stopped. He laid back, heart pounding, and tried to convince himself it was just an animal. The next morning, Linda teased him for jumping at every sound. "Come on, city boy," she joked, ruffling his hair. "This is just old house stuff, probably raccoons." But Aaron wasn't convinced. The noises hadn't been random. They had a rhythm, like something, or someone, was trying to communicate. He didn't say that out loud. They decided to explore the property in daylight. It felt safer that way. Behind the house was an old barn, partially collapsed. Ivy strangled the wood like veins beneath pale skin. Inside, shafts of sunlight filtered through the broken roof. Rusted tools lay forgotten, and the air was thick with the scent of decay. Aaron's foot hit a weak board that splintered, revealing a hidden door beneath the floorboards. It was old, reinforced with iron hinges. He called Linda over, and together they pried it open. A narrow staircase led into darkness. They descended slowly, flashlight beams catching on cobwebs and dust. The The space below was a root cellar, but it didn't feel like it was meant for food storage. Bones lined the corners, small ones, not animal. The walls were covered in carvings, circles within circles, jagged lines that didn't follow any language they knew. And then, at the far end, they saw it. A small wooden door, barely 4 feet high. It was stained dark, the wood swollen with age, and etched with the same symbols. Linda stepped back. "We're not opening that," she said firmly. "No way." Aaron nodded, though part of him wanted to know what was behind it. Curiosity burned deeper than fear. That night, Aaron couldn't sleep again. While Linda rested, he explored the study and found an old trunk filled with papers, most of them receipts and farm logs. At the bottom, buried under yellowed newspapers, was a leather journal with Martin's name pressed into the cover. The entries began normally, weather notes, planting schedules, but grew more erratic. "It's in the ground," one line read. "The house listens when you speak." Another said, "I opened the door. God help me, I opened it. Something moved inside, something ancient. I heard it breathe." Aaron read for hours. Martin wrote of dreams filled with whispers, of figures moving through the fields with no faces. He spoke of the hollow one, a thing he claimed lived beneath the soil, feeding off memory and grief. "It asked for silence," one final entry read, "and in return, it gave me time. But it always takes more. It always takes more." The next day, the wind began to blow, but only through the corn. It hissed like something angry. The stalks bent and swayed, but the trees and grass nearby stood still. Linda stood at the edge of the field, mesmerized. "It's like it's breathing," she murmured. Aaron called her back, and she snapped out of it. I don't know what I was doing," she said, visibly shaken. They returned to the house, but the unease followed them in. That night, the knocking started again, not on the door, beneath the floor, then from inside the walls and the ceiling. A slow, patient tapping. Linda clutched Aaron's hand, whispering, "Don't speak. Just don't." The moment he opened his mouth to ask why, the lights flickered and went out. Total silence. The tapping stopped, but the silence was worse. Thick, suffocating, as if something had entered the room, unseen, waiting. Linda vanished sometime after 2 a.m. Aaron found the front door ajar, the cold wind howling outside. Her footsteps led toward the barn. He ran, barefoot, through the frozen soil, shouting her name. The cellar door stood wide open. He hesitated only a moment before descending. The small door was open. He crawled inside, screaming her name. The tunnel stretched endlessly. Aaron's fingers clawed at the dirt as he pulled himself forward. The air smelled of rot and old metal. Eventually, the tunnel widened into a chamber. Bones, human bones, littered the ground. Candles, long since dead, circled a black pit in the center. Linda stood at the edge, her eyes wide, body stiff. She didn't blink. "Linda!" Aaron reached for her, but something unseen yanked her down, not violently, slowly, as if claiming what it was owed. Her mouth opened in a silent scream before darkness swallowed her. Aaron doesn't remember getting out. He woke in the car with dawn light blinding his eyes. The house loomed behind him, silent, still. He drove without stopping, without thinking. The police found nothing. No cellar, no bones, no door in the barn. The journal had vanished. No trace of Linda, just an old house with no record of strange activity. They called it grief. They called it madness. But Aaron knows. He knows. Now he lives alone in a one-bedroom apartment 3 states away. He doesn't sleep much. He doesn't talk to anyone. But sometimes, when the wind is still, he hears it again. Scratching. From under the floor, the land remembers, and the silence beneath the fields is never truly gone. It was late October when Thomas and Lydia Keller took the long drive out to the property. They weren't looking for a new start. Not really. More like a quiet escape. A place to breathe after everything they'd been through. The farmhouse was old, built in the 1930s, and tucked between vast rustling cornfields that stretched beyond the eye could see. The real estate agent hadn't bothered to come, just left the key under a flower pot and told them to make themselves at home. That should have been the first sign. When they stepped inside, the air hit them, musty, dry, with a faint hint of something metallic beneath it. Lydia wrinkled her nose. "Smells like the past," she muttered. The wooden floors groaned under their steps, like someone, or something, was following them room to room. The furniture was all still there, covered in sheets, untouched. But what stood out most was the silence. Not peaceful, not calm. It was the kind of silence that watches you. That night they decided to sleep there. Lydia lit candles since the power hadn't been turned on yet. Thomas laughed at how classic horror movie it all seemed. But his chuckle lacked conviction. Around midnight, Lydia awoke with a jolt. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, shaking her husband. A dragging sound, slow and deliberate, echoed from downstairs, like someone pulling a heavy sack across the wooden floor. Thomas grabbed the flashlight, his hands trembling just enough for Lydia to notice. They crept down the narrow hallway, its wallpaper peeling like dead skin. When they reached the living room, the sound had stopped. Nothing moved. But one of the sheets that had covered the furniture was now on the floor. They didn't speak, just looked at each other. Eyes wide, breath shallow, Lydia whispered, "Maybe the wind." Though every window was shut, every door locked, they didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning, Thomas explored the barn while Lydia inspected the house. That's when she found it. A narrow door in the pantry, hidden behind shelves full of empty jars and rusted tools. It had a chain wrapped around it and a large tarnished padlock. When Thomas returned, she pointed at it and said, "That wasn't in the listing, was it?" "No," he said flatly. His voice had changed, lower, colder. They debated whether to open it. Lydia said to leave it. But Thomas, something about the way he stared at that door unsettled her. That afternoon, she caught him in the pantry, sitting on the floor in front of the door, whispering, just barely audible. "Tom?" she asked. He didn't respond at first, just kept staring. Then he turned his head slowly and said, "It's not locked anymore." That night, Lydia woke again, this time to whispering, not from downstairs. From inside the room, she turned slowly, heart pounding. Thomas was sitting on the edge of the bed, facing the window, murmuring something she couldn't quite make out. "Thomas," she said, voice cracking, "what are you saying?" He stood abruptly, then walked out of the room without a word. Lydia followed, every instinct screaming at her not to. She found him standing at the pantry again. The door was open. "Who opened it?" she whispered. He didn't answer, just stepped inside. Lydia screamed. The air inside the pantry had grown unnaturally cold, and beyond the door was not a closet. It was stairs, leading down, way down. Lydia lit a lantern and followed, step by agonizing step, calling out for him. "Tom, please! What's going on?" Her voice trembled. The descent seemed endless. Dirt walls, the smell of rot and dampness. Finally, she saw him standing in a small stone chamber, staring at the wall. Symbols were etched into it, crude, chaotic carvings. And in the center of the room, a pit, deep, round, and breathing. Yes, breathing, slowly rising and falling. "I saw her," he said, voice not quite his own. "She called me." Lydia tried to pull him away, but the ground rumbled. A low, growling hum. Then, the whispering grew louder, surrounding them, screaming inside their ears without ever rising in volume. She dragged him back up the stairs, not looking back. The following nights were worse. Furniture moved. Lights flickered despite no electricity. Scratches appeared on walls that hadn't been there the night before. And Thomas, he was slipping, speaking in his sleep, giggling sometimes, saying names Lydia had never heard. When she tried to record it, the footage glitched, froze, and in one frame, just one, she saw someone standing behind her in the mirror. A girl, dirt-streaked, smiling. Desperate, Lydia found the nearest neighbour, an old woman named Mabel, who lived 5 miles out. When Lydia described the house, the woman went pale. "That house was supposed to be condemned," Mabel whispered. "The last family, they disappeared. All of them. One night, just gone. Only thing left was that damn locked door." Lydia returned with Mabel the next morning, but the house was different. The windows were boarded up from the inside. The door wouldn't budge. "Thomas!" Lydia screamed, banging on the walls. Mabel backed away slowly. "You need to leave. Now, don't turn around," she whispered. Lydia turned anyway. Inside the upstairs window, Thomas stood. But it wasn't him anymore. His smile was too wide, his eyes too black, and something else behind him, watching. They say Lydia was never quite the same. She moved to the city, cut ties with everyone, never spoke of that weekend again. But sometimes she'd wake in the middle of the night, trembling, not from a dream, but from a whisper. And those who tried to visit the house after, none stayed more than a few hours. One man reportedly clawed his own ears, trying to stop the sounds. Another went missing entirely, last seen opening the pantry. To this day, the house still stands. The corn still grows unnaturally high around it. And if you're quiet enough and brave enough to stand on the porch, you might hear her, the girl, still smiling, still whispering, waiting. I wasn't supposed to go back. Not after what happened between me and my brother 3 years ago. But the letter was short, barely a few words scribbled in rushed handwriting. "Come to the farmhouse. It's urgent. Mark." That was it. No explanation, no greeting. Just that cryptic, unsettling message. I hadn't set foot on our father's old corn farm in southern Illinois since his funeral. After Dad passed, Mark stayed behind to run the place while I moved to Chicago. We drifted apart, Our last phone call ended with shouting, something about inheritance, the land, resentment. But now, after all this silence, this note appeared in my mailbox. Not a text, not an email, a letter. And somehow, despite everything in me screaming not to, I packed my bag and left the city that night. The road into the farm was just as I remembered. Narrow, cracked asphalt flanked by endless cornfields on both sides. There were no streetlights out here, just the rhythmic thud of my tires over uneven ground and the rising fog swallowing the horizon. It was almost midnight when I pulled up to the front gate. The old wooden sign that once read, "Bennett Family Farm," now hung crooked, half rotted. The farmhouse loomed in the distance, its silhouette dimly outlined by moonlight. No lights on, no sound. I sat in the car for a moment, my hand frozen on the keys. Something felt off, not scary exactly, but wrong, like the whole place had stopped breathing. I killed the engine and stepped out. The silence was so complete that I could hear the corn rustling. Only, there was no wind. The front door was unlocked. I called out Mark's name 3 times, each louder than the last. Nothing. The living room was exactly as it had been years ago. Same worn-out recliner, same crooked family photos. But there was a stale smell in the air, like damp earth mixed with something metallic. The kitchen table had 2 coffee mugs set out, but one was shattered on the floor, dried black liquid pooled around the shards. I checked the rooms one by one, empty. His bedroom was untouched, bed made. A half-open drawer with some of his clothes sticking out. No signs of a struggle, no blood, just a strange sensation, like someone had left in the middle of doing something, without warning, without purpose. That's when I noticed the cellar door. It was ajar, just a crack, but wide enough to see that the lights were on below. Every step down into that cellar felt heavier than the last. The light flickered. The air was colder down there, far colder than it should have been for a summer night. The cellar had always been used for storage, but now it was cleared out, shelves empty, just a single wooden chair in the middle of the room, and on it, a cassette player. I almost laughed. Who uses a cassette player in 2025? I pressed play. There was static at first, then breathing, ragged, panicked breathing, and Mark's voice. If you're hearing this, I'm probably gone. Don't trust the field. Don't go past the silo. They live there. I made a mistake. I invited it in. I thought I could control it. But it's not just the house, Sam. It's in the land. It's under the soil. Listen for the silence. It means it's watching. Then screaming. Horrific, guttural screaming that didn't sound like my brother at all. Then silence. I bolted up the stairs, heart thundering in my chest. I didn't know what terrified me more, what I'd heard, or the fact that something about it felt real. I tried calling Mark's cell. Deadline. I should have left then. I should have gotten in my car and driven away. But something kept me anchored. That damn silence he mentioned. I stepped out onto the porch. The night was utterly still. Not a single cricket. No rustling leaves. No breeze. Just silence. Drawn by some irrational impulse, I walked toward the cornfield. I don't even know why. Maybe I thought I'd find answers. Maybe I thought Mark was out there. But every step into that field felt like I was sinking into something ancient, something hungry. The rows of corn closed in behind me as I walked, And that was when I realized there were no insects here, no birds, just the sound of my own breath. The old silo stood like a corpse in the moonlight. Its base was covered in vines, and the door hung off its hinges. Inside, it smelled of mildew and rotted grain. I held my flashlight tight as I stepped in, sweeping the beam across the cracked concrete floor. There was a trail, muddy boot prints leading into the far corner. A man's coat was nailed to the wall, Mark's coat, and beneath it, something carved into the concrete. Feed it or be it. I stumbled back, tripping over something soft. When I aimed the light down, my stomach turned. A rabbit, skinned and gutted, its eyes still open. A fresh offering. That's when I heard it behind me. Something moving in the corn. Not walking. Slithering. I ran. I didn't look back. I sprinted across the open field and back toward the house. But halfway there, I heard it. My name. Sam. Whispered like a breath on the nape of my neck. I turned. Nothing. But the field. It was different now. The rows didn't line up the way they should. The path I'd taken was gone. I was lost. Then came the laughter. Low, guttural, layered. As if multiple voices were trying to imitate human amusement. I fell to my knees, clutching my ears. And then, all at once, silence again. When I looked up, the house was gone. Just more corn. I must have blacked out. When I came to, I was in the cellar again. The chair was empty. The cassette player smashed. My phone, missing. I climbed out and found daylight outside. The sun was up. Birds were singing. The corn swayed gently in the breeze. And the house looked normal. Mark was on the porch, sipping coffee, smiling like none of it happened. "Rough night?" he asked casually, as if I'd had a bad dream. I didn't answer. I just stared at him. He smiled wider. "They said you might come back. The land likes you, Sam. It remembers blood." I tried to leave. I swear I did. But the road twisted into the same circle, leading me right back to the farm. Every attempt, north, south, even through the fields, brought me back to that front porch. Mark wouldn't explain anything. He just sat, calm as ever, like some puppet being told what to say. That night, I heard them scratching at the windows, whispering through the vents. I saw things moving in the reflections that weren't in the room. My thoughts stopped feeling like my own. And when I woke up the next morning, there was a letter waiting on the kitchen table. "Come to the farmhouse. It's urgent." But this time, it wasn't addressed to me.